Happy New Year. Welcome to Hope Survival YouTube. Thanks for joining in for this first video of 2025. This video's topic is titled Terrorism, Terrorism in America, Recent Terrorist Attacks, and how you can protect yourself to the best that you can. And all these sections will be in one video. I felt it's important that I kind of give you a quick history to give you a better understanding of where we are today on the topic of terrorism and how it can potentially be used as a political weapon from its original roots of the last 40 or 50 years. So we're going to talk about terrorism in America, recent terrorist attacks, and how you can protect yourself. Okay, so I have some notes here that because it's a lot of information that I've jotted down, I wanted to get this video posted out to you about five or so days ago, but I had a little bit of a bug that included a cough that made it difficult to talk without coughing, and also it's kind of a difficult topic to do a video on for this platform, simply because of what's allowed, what's not allowed, and the information that I'm going to share. I have to be careful, not just because of the platform, but certain things that I would like to state that I can't state. So I'll do my best to give you the pertinent information of it. So hang in there. Alright, so the first thing we need to do is we need to define what is terrorism. And it's important that you understand this section of the videos so that you'll have a better understanding of the information in the latter part. So terrorism is the unlawful use of violence and intimidation, especially against civilians in the pursuit of political aims. And that is the basic definition of terrorism. Okay, and then you can go and you can Google or search engine, and you can look up the definition of terrorism, and you will find that there are many organizational definitions of terrorism that apply internationally and domestic. Alright, the CIA has a definition, the Department of Homeland Security has a definition, the FBI has a definition, the National Counterterrorism Center has a definition, NATO has a definition, the Department of Defense has a definition, the Department of State has a definition. And although they all work around the basic definition, they have some added qualifiers for what is terrorism. And then there are laws and codes that can make it applicable or not applicable. And over a period of years, during the period of when we went to war the second time in the Middle East, and then 9/11, we started to see a shift in what were the qualifiers to meet the definition of terrorism and domestic terrorism. So, radical terrorism is terrorist acts carried out by fundamentalist militant extremists from a certain religion. And we first started hearing radical terrorism and radical terrorists being used during the administration during the Second Gulf War by the president in power when 9/11 occurred. Then domestic terrorist, it's a form of terrorism in which victims within a country are targeted by a participant with the same citizenship. Meaning, example, recently in New Orleans and Las Vegas, we were told that the terrorist acts were from a domestic terrorist. Okay, so keep that in mind. So shortly after 9/11, the whole philosophy of terrorism started to shift from what was mainly a focus on international terrorism. We started hearing more about the possibility of domestic terrorists, and this is when the administration in power around 2010 started shifting from a focus on Middle Eastern terrorists to domestic terrorists, and terminology was changed in documents to focus on domestic terrorists who were veterans, ex-military, white, Christian, patriot-minded individuals. And this was kind of alarming, especially for anyone who had served or was serving at that time, because so much terminology, methodology started shifting, and the administration hired numerous individuals who had previously been primarily documented as the falling into the categories that were listed under Islamic, Middle Eastern, and so forth. There was an event that occurred in 2009 at Fort Hood when a gentleman named Major Hassan, who was in the U.S. Army, turned a weapon on his own troops at Fort Hood, and he murdered 13 troops and injured 30. And at the time was the worst active shooting in U.S. history. Why this was alarming and noteworthy is because the government did not categorize this as an active shooter event, nor did they categorize it as an act of terrorism or domestic terrorism, and they ruled it as workplace violence. Okay, and that changed a lot of how things are viewed today. So some believe that terrorism it's not an ideology like communism or capitalism. Personally, I disagree. Hundreds of thousands who are homeless and cannot read or write are taught a radical version of a religion promoting radicalization that delivers violence and intimidation to include up to death. Um, that in itself could be a long video, but that was kind of the premise from um, those of us in the United States, and how those of us who worked in the field of terrorism, counterterrorism, anti-terrorism, how we were educated and what we were taught, and we found in research and doing analysis was how individuals who could not read or write were brought into terrorist camps, and they were indoctrinated into this mindset. Okay. Um, uh, the interesting thing is, for um, many of these Middle Eastern organizations, a lot of times they are viewed as um, basically individuals who come in who are taught how to use a weapon and they become terrorists. But many of these organizations are solid. They have their own education system, they have their own monetary system, they have their own logistics system. They are very well funded, equipped, and organized throughout their organization. Okay, and this is a bit different from terrorist organizations historically in the past. Okay, so shortly after 9/11, we had this thing called the Patriot Act that came about, and everyone was happy and thrilled, even though we were giving up some of our own liberties, and we were trading our privacy and liberties for what was told to us to be safety, and it was a trade-off. And then a couple years after the Patriot Act, kind of shifted, and that's when we started hearing of a new focus on domestic terrorists to protect the country, and that's when the labels of who were the primary focus on as being possible domestic terrorists, that being patriots, former veterans, those who may still be serving, and so forth. Okay. Interesting. There were around this same time frame, 2009, there were several Middle Easterners who were under charges in federal cases as supporting terrorism from here within the United States, either raising funds or equipping terrorist organizations that were international to commit terrorist acts in the United States or against U.S. assets abroad. And in most of these federal cases, around 2009, 2010, all the charges were dropped against these individuals, and some of them were actually hired by the federal government to come in, and they were used to redraft what was documented during that time as the Department of Defense focus on radical terrorists, and most of the terminology was scrubbed from all the documents, and the new ideology was then put in place, away from the Middle Eastern radicalization of these individuals. And then in December of 2010, we had the start of Arab Spring in North Africa and the Middle East. And that's when we had the massive purge of individuals leaving the Middle East and going into Europe and the United States. In July of 2010, we had an Egyptian American appointed within NASA, where the President of the United States at the time told the individual the number one goal was to improve relations with the Middle Eastern world. Nowhere in there was there an explanation of space development or anything that fell really within purview of NASA. Then around the same time frame, give a few months, was when that same president fired nearly 200 to 240 generals and colonels who did not fall in line with the new ideology of removing the focus of the Middle East to a more domestic approach. So you can see how historically in the past, prior to the conflict in the Middle East, what was terrorism during that time, to where it was shifting to and remains still to this date. And something that for those of you that may have been aware pre 911, back in the 70s and 80s, we used to hear of terrorist attacks from the Red Brigade, the Irish Republic Army, Abu Sayyaf group, taking over the cruise liner, and I think the gentleman in the wheelchair's name was Mr. Klinghoffer, who was assassinated. Or you may remember TV showing terrorist attacks against airliners, and the famous TWA picture of the terrorist leaning over the pilot, looking out the window with the gun to the head. Or you may remember the attack on the Marine barracks in Beirut, Lebanon. Back then, terrorist groups, they were either state-sponsored or non-state sponsored, and that would make a huge determination as to how the United States would react and respond. Oftentimes, most often, the attacks were by the U.S. military against these targets and these camps. But there were, even at the same time, there were a couple of domestic groups that we didn't hear a whole lot about, but there was one called ELF, there was one called ALF, and then the Weather Underground. And most of these organizations were protecting nature, they were protecting animals. And then there were the radicalized Weather Underground, who were famous for attacking, I believe it was the police station in New York years ago. So as time has passed and history is documented, the organizations have changed, and in the last 20 to 30 years, almost all terrorist activity has been driven through the government and the media as being from the Middle East. And you can pick and choose which nation and who supports them, and um, why they may commit the acts that they commit, whether it's for money, whether it's for recognition of an ideology, it may be religious, and so forth. So, where we were then and where we are now is it's the same level of threat. It's just coming from different organizations, and it has grown far more sophisticated through the development of the internet, through the development of chat rooms, through the development of technology, and how smart the terrorist organizations have grown to be in their method of delivering. So, in many cases, it is not being ahead of them, but we're basically chasing them as to how they are advancing their delivery systems and their abilities to move threats from where they originate in developing the weapons and training the terrorist to where they're going to deliver. I mean, we've gone from what used to be suicide bombers wearing a suicide vest that had basically three means of detonation. The individual wearing the vest could detonate it. There would be a spotter who, if the vest wearer backed out, the spotter would detonate the vest, or if the individual tried to take the vest off of their body, it would detonate. Back then, that seemed a bit sophisticated, and now, we went through that. We went through barometric pressurized switches, putting devices aboard airframes. When they reached a certain altitude, the barometric pressure changed and it would trigger the switch and detonate the explosives. The bombing of over Lockerbie, Scotland is a good example of this type method. And now we've gone from drones, we've gone from that to drones. We've gone to the vehicle VBIEDs, where our troops at the time would drive over a buried explosive in the road and it would detonate. And it goes on to can they deliver some type of a chemical weapon, biological weapon through aerosols, either in a canister on the ground or by using a drone. So the threat remains the same. It's just that it has shifted away from foreign locations to a heightened capability and a heightened possibility within the United States. So that brings us to where we are today. So when we talk about terrorism internationally, a good example in my past life was I could be working in a foreign country and helping to build plans for providing security to hopefully avert being a soft target to prevent a terrorist attack. And the number one question was who had sole authority for force protection of that country. And even though I was a Department of Defense asset, I was chopped working a Department of State issue. And the question would be if myself or a team I worked with, or if U.S. forces were in that country um, working, who was the overall authority for providing force protection to that country. And this was pre 911 and right around 911. And there were new countries that we were going to that the Department of State nor the Department of Defense had agreed on who would be the sole authority. So um, this is important because if there's a terrorist attack from an American perspective, who would be responsible for responding to either evacuate U.S. troops out or providing shelter and protection and use of force policy in that country as being a U.S. troop? Would you have the legal right to defend yourself on that foreign soil, and who granted that permission? So it's not as cut and dry as many would think, or if you're watching TV and you see a terrorist attack happening somewhere, whether it was a hostage situation or an attack with weapons, or maybe a vehicle loaded with explosives ramming the gate of a facility. It's who's going to be responsible immediately after that attack to provide the direction to support the troops who are on the ground. And if you can imagine rolling that over now into the United States, where we don't have U.S. troops operating on domestic soil, it would be a matter of jurisdictions within a state or a county, and who's going to be the law enforcement authority initially responding. And as we have witnessed in recent what was titled terrorist attacks, as a label, I'm not so sure by definition they would fall into that category, but who we have witnessed who initially immediately comes out, and that's the FBI. Okay. The FBI has basically taken over the investigation, working with the Department of Defense and so forth. So, with that said, there are, if you understand terrorism and the history of terrorism and how terrorist organizations work, a terrorist group versus a lone wolf, and you apply it in a sense to each of these events individually. There were 5 or 6 events that occurred in like 24 to 36 hours. There was one using a vehicle in New Orleans as a weapon, and then the individual got out with a firearm. Then you have a cyber vehicle in Vegas. There was an attack in New York using weapons, guns, and then there was another event with a semi-trailer going down the highway, and then there was one that got minimal to no reporting where an individual or individuals tried spraying something on other individuals that were gathered. Okay, so when you say, okay, well, what group, historically, what group would use this type of attack method? They're all over the place. Okay, you look at like uh, most terrorists and terrorist organizations, when they attack, they have historically they have run a level of surveillance. They've determined if it's a soft target, and after a period of surveillance, they will pick their time and their method of how they're going to attack. Okay, it all depends on what is the motive that they're trying to achieve. Is it mass casualty? Is it to get the attention of a government? Or is it to kidnap individuals for a ransom? Or is it to promote some form of or some level of religious statement? And so, with terrorism in America, the big thing that has changed over the last 20 years and more recently since the withdrawal from Afghanistan, we've had hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of individuals crossing our southern border. And people ask the question, well, we have the terrorism watch list and we have all these individuals coming into the country. And it's been reported that numerous of the individuals crossing were on the terrorism watch list and they were released. But a bigger concern and scare is the fact since the withdrawal from Afghanistan, um, some analysts say that at least 100 new training camps have been set up throughout Afghanistan in numerous locations being protected by the Taliban. And these locations have thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of new faces who are not on a watch list. They are unknown. Their faces are unknown. Their biometrics are unknown, so they're not going to be in a system. And they're going through these individual camps that are specific to skills. It may be a camp that focuses solely on being a sniper. It may be on building explosives, different types of explosives. And it could be one on building chemical weapons. It all just depends. But these camps are teaching these skills to these individuals. And another scary thought is that some analysts believe that they have advanced their skills to the point that they now can penetrate through security systems and arenas and stadiums and large gatherings where technology is being used to detect certain type weapons. And it is believed that they can get these weapons through these security systems. So that should really make the hair on your neck stand up. So we're basically facing a whole new wave of individuals and capabilities and technology to penetrate existing systems. As I said earlier, um, it's a game of chase versus a game of defense. You can only defend against what you know, um, and that makes it very difficult if you don't know the extent of their technology and capabilities. So, as far as going to large gatherings and arenas and sporting events and things of that nature, you might want to do so with caution. Again, don't live in fear. You just need to be smart and go about your life making smarter choices. The attacks that we witnessed here in America, we did not have any of that. And when you're setting up to defend against possible threats, one of the things that you try to do is you want to set up, i.e., say for defending, you're going to have crowds of people on the outside near streets and roads, well, of course, you want to put up bollards and barriers and things of that nature to block all mobile access. And you're basically eliminating it down from a four-wheel or more type wheeled vehicle and put the individuals on foot. And then you're dealing with individuals on foot with possibly with backpacks. All right, so you're narrowing it down on the potential of the degree of the weapon being used to cause harm. And now instead of looking for vehicles and four-wheelers, you're now looking for sole individuals on foot, possibly carrying backpacks. And in New Orleans, evidently, they failed to deploy their full plan, if it was part of their plan, to block off street access to vehicles, which was a huge error in judgment and practice on their part. The problem with the individual that pulled off the attack in New Orleans is when you look at the background of the individual, you know, he was made out to be some degree of military bad butt, but he was actually an admin troop who went into IT. So the delivery method and level of sophistication for this fell short a bit. It was also stated by a brother, his brother, that he had been radicalized over the last year. If this was the case, how did it make it this far? That he actually made it to the point of getting in a vehicle, using it as a weapon, and targeting fellow citizens. The attack in Las Vegas has stink written all over it. Number one, the individual was one of the being an active Green Beret, and with the clearance level that he had at the time of the attack, his degree of sophistication and ability to create weapons to cause harm was very high. All right. And the statement released by the service that he served in stated that he did have a very high clearance, and that he had tried to make contact with the terrorist organization over recent months or a year. Well, if that's the case, why did he still have an active high-level clearance that should have been suspended immediately? Okay, and he should have probably been taken out of an active role and put on temporary duty somewhere. You don't have this information on someone with a clearance at that level. I know, been there. You don't allow them to continue having access to some of the highest information and secrets of our country. All right, it doesn't happen. Two, if he wanted to cause, if his goal was to cause great harm to a lot of individuals, why did he use fireworks as an explosive device in the vehicle? And why did he pick a day where there would be minimal to zero personnel in the vicinity of where the vehicle would be detonated? Doesn't pass the stink test. And I personally think that in time we're going to find out that this individual is still alive if the system doesn't get to him first. They were talking about how he he may have been upset because his DNA did not match that of a child. Well, if it wasn't him in the vehicle that burned up, the DNA wouldn't match. And also, the vehicle burn up and the body in the vehicle burn up, but yet his credentials didn't burn up. Well, I go back to 911 and the aircraft that crashed into the towers and burn up. Well, at the degree of the fire, nothing should have been left intact. However, the entity and powers to be had copies of all of the passports of the terrorists aboard the aircraft. If you've ever flown international, you, the individual, carry your own passport. So, just something to think about. There will definitely be more to come out on this, but it's going to be up to you to use your own judgment, do your own research. Don't follow the rabbit down the hole and don't jump to conclusions. Just think outside the box. That's all I'm saying on that one. Okay? So, let's move on to how we can protect ourselves. Okay, so let's talk about how to protect yourself. A lot of steps that you can use to protect yourself are areas we've already covered in basic preparedness, staying outside the box, left of bang, and always having backup plans to your primary plan. But we'll cover some of those. I know some of you are already doing these things, but I'll just go over a few to remind you again. So always have a ready bag in your vehicle in the event that you are faced with some form of an event or disaster where you have to survive until rescued, and you're going to need the things that are in your bag for basic survival: some food, some water, a whistle, a way to stay warm, and so forth. Walking shoes, things that are comfortable, clothes that are warm, dress in layers, and so forth. Okay? Now let's start with your vehicle. I know some of you are aggressive drivers and you're always in a hurry to get to your destination. You need to drive with caution always. You need to always give yourself room to maneuver left and right, and always leave space in front of you between the vehicle in front of you so you're not boxed in. Even when you're at a stoplight or slow traffic, always monitor your mirrors to know what's coming up behind you, looking for individuals on foot, individuals who may be on a two-wheel device such as a motorcycle or a moped. That is a method used in the past by a group primarily in Greece, 17 November, to assassinate individuals, and then they had a method of getaway from the attack site, just as an example to you. Okay, but always have the ability to maneuver away from potential threats, and be thinking in your mind, if you have to get out of your vehicle and grab your bag and run, what direction you're going to run to get away from the possible threat. Okay, that is solely on you and up to you. When you're out in public, pick and choose your destinations carefully. Know what's going on in your community. It's very easy using the internet and chat group methods to set up a flash mob in a mall or at a store, where within minutes hundreds of individuals can hone in on the targeted location. If you go in a mall or a store, always be looking for exit signs on a path out that you can get from where you're at when the threat occurs to get you out of the store. kind of have an idea of where the exit is going to exit out of the facility or out of the mall, to get back to a safe location or to your vehicle to get away. If you're in a multi-floor facility, you need, most people use elevators. You need to know where the stairwells and where the stairwells come out at when you hit the ground floor. Parking, most locations have exterior parking. You don't want to use parking, underground parking or parking garages where you can get trapped in. And when you're heading to your vehicle, if your vehicle is parked alone and there's a van or some type vehicle of that nature parked close to you and there's no other cars around, you want to be extremely cautious of going to your vehicle, especially if you're a female and you're alone. Always remember, on your key fob you should have a button that is the siren to your vehicle if you need to set it off. If you feel you're threatened, go back in the store that you exited, and ask for help. Alright, if you're out and about and you go to a restaurant, always pick a table carefully, set with your back to the wall facing the entrance. You want to have a table that, if possible, is not bolted to the floor, so if there is a threat on the outside or someone comes into the restaurant that is a threat, that you can remove the table and use it as a shield until you make your next move, to get to safety. Don't sit near large glass windows. If there's some type of explosive device on the exterior of the location, it is the glass that quickly become excuse me. It is the glass that becomes the weapon. Once the detonation occurs, the glass will splinter in most cases and becomes flying torpedoes, and it will penetrate through sheetrock walls to the next room. So you need to be very careful. All right. So these are just some things to think about when you're out in the public. Also, make sure the safest place you have is your home. Okay. And once you get in a vehicle, your threat level escalates. You are most vulnerable when you are mobile, going from point A to point B. Pick alternate routes. Don't drive the same route every day from point A to point B. Don't make yourself become predictable. Check your mailbox at different times each day. So if by chance you are possibly being targeted for a crime, make sure you close your garage doors at night. Don't leave your garage door opener in your car, or your keys under the mat. Personally, I don't put decals on my vehicle showing any political persuasion, and I don't put yard signs in my yard showing any political preference, i.e. so that passerbys coming by who may be of the opposite political persuasion, they will not target or remember my home or my safe haven as a political target. So make sure you lock your doors. If you have an alarm system, turn it on. If you have one and it doesn't work, fix it. There's no point in having cameras and alarms if you're not going to use them. And I know lots of folks who have them and they just do not use them. Okay. If you don't have cameras, add some cameras. They're a great security asset to the exterior of your home. If you live in an apartment or some type of multi-occupant facility, you need to know who lives around you. If you need a safe haven outside of your dwelling, you need a safe haven place. If you can't go out the door and get to it, always consider cutting through the wall and getting to the next um, dwelling to find an escape route out. Know your stairwells. If you have an elevator, know the stairwells, know where they take you to and where you come out at on the outside. So these are just a few offerings to try to help your mindset. The thing is to always be thinking and always be looking. You want to stay outside the box and left to bang. You don't want to be caught in a situation where you are right on the threat. And sometimes that may happen, not by any bad doings on your part. It just occurs and you're a victim of circumstance. But you need to always be thinking of these type of scenarios, running them through your head. If you're traveling with a spouse, talk through them. Hey, if this happens, what should we do? Or this is what we're going to do. When we exit, we're going to run left, we're going to run right, and so on. Who's going to grab, if you only have one ready bag in your car, who's going to grab the bag? If you can stay within the law of your state and you have the ability to have some form of protection, I would strongly encourage you to do so. And that can come in lethal and non-lethal devices. So hopefully this has helped you in some way. The big thing is to be smart, to understand everything is not as it appears. Everyone doesn't tell the truth on post-event situations like the Las Vegas case. I do believe more is going to come out of this in regards to what the individual who has been labeled as the terrorist. I think that the complete truth has not been revealed, and that's just my opinion. So if you like this video, please hit like. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to help our channel grow. If you have any comments, leave them below. If you have questions, you can email me at preparedness101@protonmail.com. And I will get back to you as soon as possible. Stay safe out there. Things are not always business as usual. Don't let haste put you in a bad situation. And always keep the faith. Don't live in fear. Don't forget to count your blessings. We are blessed people. Bravo Echo out.